I was living in Washington, D.C., working at a large Unitarian Universalist church in 2016, 2017, um, during that very climactic presidential election. And leading up to that election and in the months that followed the inauguration, there were so many protests in Washington, D.C. Every single day there was a protest, if not multiple protests, if not a protest about another protest or a protest about a protest that might happen. And as someone who's been an activist and a fighter for social justice for a long time, I was out in the streets a lot, hooting and hollering and marching and just showing up for causes that I felt were right and good and needed to be seen and heard. And within about 2 months of trying to maintain that lifestyle, I was completely burnt out, cynical, and apathetic. And I remember talking to the associate minister at Cedar Lane, the church I was serving as DRE, and she said, "Hillary, you have to pick your two causes and just commit yourself to those." She was a lifelong DCer, and she was just like, "This is life in DC. Everyone is protesting all the time, trying to be heard. The president, the government, it's all here. This is where it happens. But you just have to pick your two causes and show up for those, because if you show up for everything else, you're gonna keel right over." And so I heeded her advice and I chose women's rights and environmental justice and showed up for as many things as I possibly could. But soon realized that, like, sure, I could pick my two causes, and yes, I care deeply about women's rights, queer rights more and more, and environmental justice. But I realized that my approach to social justice was informed by our seventh principle. You know, I don't believe that any structure of oppression can exist in isolation from other structures of depression, of oppression, which is depressing. They exist in a vast interdependent web, a vast interdependent system of oppression. And thus, to truly pursue, to seek environmental justice, I have to educate myself about racism and misogyny and classism and transphobia, all the things, because the oppression of any living being is going to lead to the degradation of our planet. You know, when we treat certain beings like they're not living beings, like they don't deserve rights or care or compassion, clean water, food, a place to live, what do we think about the planet? Can we really seek to heal something while ignoring the deep pain and suffering and violence against something else? So I picked my two causes, but I eventually started caring about everything else again along the way. And of course, I've had to learn how to regulate my energy so I don't burn out. I'm sure I'm not alone in this struggle. And what I hope to bring to a social justice ministry, holding that idea of the interdependent web of oppression and the interdependent web of compassion and curiosity that can undo that, and also holding that idea of I can't do everything. What I hope at a place like First U, where amazing social justice work, faith in action work is being done for new Mainers, and in dinners where you're having big discussions about huge topics that are both healing and causing pain in our world, is to continue the opportunities to teach each other and learn from each other. At White Mountain this past year, I had the blessing and the challenge of serving as one of the facilitators of our anti-racist white affinity groups, which were groups of both students and faculty that met once or twice a month for an hour, all white identifying folks. And we gathered and we talked about race and what being white has led us to see and not see in the world, and led us to care about and not care about in the world. And these were messy conversations, but in the midst of that mess was great beauty and big awakenings, and also lots of furrowed brows and long silences. But what I learned again in those conversations is that so many of us don't see the oppression in this world and didn't even know we weren't seeing it. And so we need to learn how to see what we're not seeing. And I don't think we need to call on people who experience the oppression that we don't see and don't understand to teach us about that oppression, though we do need to look to teachers, to literature, to each other, to social justice activism that's taking place in our communities, and just see what it does to our minds and see what it does to our perspectives and experience in our world, and continue to poke at each other and ask, what are you thinking about? What do you see right now? What are you learning? What do you understand? What do you not understand? And hold each other accountable, but also hold each other, because it will be messy, but we need to show that we care deeply about each other, because in caring deeply about each other, we will be caring deeply about the work. So church is a platform. It's a hub. It's a hub to share, to learn, to teach, to act, and then to come back together in a beloved, caring way and just ask, what did we learn? What did we notice? And just continue again and again and again, undoing that web and creating a new one.